Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into a story of international intrigue, diplomatic drama, and a whole lot of tension. Buckle up as we unpack the increasingly complicated relationship between India and Canada. You see, these two countries, they used to be tight. We're talking trade deals, cultural exchanges, the whole shebang. But recently, let's just say things have gotten a little frosty. And by frosty, I mean accusations are flying, diplomats are being sent packing, and the only thing colder than the relationship is a Canadian winter. So, how did we get here? How did two seemingly friendly nations end up at odds? Well, my friends, that's exactly what we're going to find out. Let's rewind the clock and trace the timeline of this international fallout. In February 2018, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau visited India. State visits are usually about diplomacy and handshakes, but this visit had something extra. Trudeau attended a dinner hosted by the Canadian High Commissioner. Among the guests was Hardeep Singh Atwal. Atwal was a former Sikh separatist convicted of attempted murder. His presence caused a stir. Indian officials were displeased. The Canadian government called it an oversight. The Atwal Affair cast a shadow over Trudeau's visit. It was a sign of things to come. A diplomatic faux pas, a harbinger of the storm. Fast forward to December 2020. Farmers in India were staging massive protests against new agricultural laws. These protests weren't just local affairs, they were making headlines around the world. Enter Justin Trudeau, once again wading into the waters of Indo-Canadian relations. This time, it was his words that stirred the pot. Trudeau expressed his concern for the protesting farmers, even going so far as to say that Canada would always stand up for the rights of peaceful protesters. Now, on the surface, that might seem like a fairly innocuous statement, but in the world of diplomacy, words matter. And India saw Trudeau's comments as a direct interference in their internal affairs. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs didn't mince words, calling Trudeau's remarks unwarranted and ill-informed. They accused Canada of trying to appease extremist elements and warned that such interference could damage bilateral relations. The farmers' protest may have faded from the headlines, but the diplomatic fallout from Trudeau's comments lingered. It was another crack in the foundation of the India-Canada relationship. Another sign that things were not quite right. June 2023. A Sikh temple in Surrey, British Columbia, becomes the backdrop for a shocking crime. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a prominent Sikh separatist leader, is shot dead in the temple parking lot. Nijjar was a controversial figure, wanted in India for his alleged involvement in terrorist activities. But in Canada, he was a community leader, a vocal advocate for Sikh rights. His assassination sent shockwaves through the Sikh diaspora and ignited a firestorm of speculation and accusations. Indian authorities had long accused Nijjar of being a key figure in the Khalistan movement, a separatist movement seeking to create an independent Sikh state in the Punjab region. They had even designated him as a terrorist. Canada, however, had granted Nijjar asylum, citing a lack of evidence to support India's claims. The Canadian government maintained that Nijjar was a peaceful activist exercising his right to free speech. Nijjar's killing, regardless of who was responsible, was a turning point in India-Canada relations. It brought long-simmering tensions over the Sikh separatist movement to the forefront and set the stage for a dramatic escalation in the diplomatic standoff between the two countries. Chapter 4. From handshakes to standoffs, G20 and a trade freeze. September 2023. The G20 summit, a gathering of the world's most powerful leaders, was supposed to be an opportunity for international cooperation and dialogue. But for India and Canada, it became yet another stage for their growing feud. Behind the scenes of the summit, hosted in New Delhi, a chill had settled over the usually cordial interactions between the two nations. Trade talks, once progressing at a steady clip, were abruptly put on hold. The official reason given was the need for more time to iron out details, but the timing was suspect, coinciding with the escalating tensions over Nijjar's killing. It was clear that the diplomatic chill was starting to impact the economic relationship between the two countries. And then came the G20 itself. The world watched as Trudeau and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi shared an icy exchange captured by cameras during the summit. The body language spoke volumes, strained smiles, curt nods, a distinct lack of warmth. The message was clear: this was not business as usual. The Nijjar case had cast a long shadow over the G20, turning what should have been a moment of global unity into a stark reminder of the fractured relationship between two once friendly nations. Chapter 5. Diplomatic deportations, visas, and expulsions. The weeks following the G20 were a whirlwind of diplomatic maneuvering and escalating tensions. First came the expulsions. India expelled a senior Canadian diplomat, accusing Canada of harboring extremists and interfering in India's internal affairs. Canada, in a tit-for-tat move, responded by expelling an Indian diplomat from Ottawa. The diplomatic spat was a clear sign that the relationship between the two countries was deteriorating rapidly. But it wasn't just diplomats feeling the heat. India then announced it was suspending visa services for Canadians, citing security threats. The move had immediate and significant implications for students, tourists, and business travelers hoping to travel between the two countries. The visa suspension was a major blow, particularly for the thousands of Indian students who travel to Canada each year for higher education. It was a stark reminder that this diplomatic spat wasn't just about political posturing, it had real-world consequences for everyday people. By October 2023, the situation had reached a fever pitch. In an unprecedented move, Canada announced it was drastically reducing its diplomatic presence in India, recalling 41 diplomats from its embassy in New Delhi. The Canadian government cited concerns for the safety of its diplomats, pointing to alleged threats and intimidation tactics being used against them. While Canada maintained its embassy in New Delhi remained open, the drastic reduction in staff sent a clear message. Trust between the two countries had eroded to an alarming degree. India, for its part, denied any involvement in threats against Canadian diplomats, calling the accusations baseless and accusing Canada of trying to shift the narrative away from its own alleged support for Sikh separatists. The recall of diplomats was a dramatic escalation of the diplomatic standoff. It was a clear sign that both sides were digging in their heels, with no clear path towards reconciliation in sight. May 2024. Nearly a year after the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, there was a significant development in the case. Canadian authorities announced the arrest of 3 men in connection with the killing. The arrests, while a major step forward in the investigation, did little to quell the diplomatic tensions between India and Canada. India continued to accuse Canada of not doing enough to address what it saw as a haven for Sikh extremists operating within its borders. Canada, meanwhile, maintained that it was committed to upholding the rule of law and that any individuals involved in Nijjar's killing would be held accountable. The investigation continued, but the shadow of the assassination continued to loom large over the relationship between the two countries. The arrests, while significant, did little to bridge the trust deficit that had come to define the India-Canada relationship. The question of whether justice for Nijjar would ultimately bring closure to this chapter in the diplomatic saga remained unanswered. October 2024. 1 year after Canada's recall of diplomats from India, the situation remained tense. In a move that surprised few observers, Canada announced the expulsion of 6 Indian diplomats, accusing them of being involved in activities that threatened Canada's national security. The expulsions, which came after months of behind-the-scenes diplomatic wrangling, marked another low point in the relationship between the two countries. Canada accused India of continuing to support extremist elements within Canada and of interfering in its domestic affairs. India, in turn, denied the allegations, calling them baseless, and accusing Canada of engaging in a campaign of disinformation aimed at discrediting India on the world stage. The back-and-forth accusations highlighted the deep mistrust that had come to define the relationship. As the year drew to a close, the diplomatic standoff between India and Canada showed no signs of abating. The expulsions were a stark reminder that the path to reconciliation remained long and uncertain. So, there you have it. A relationship that was once characterized by warmth and cooperation has descended into a diplomatic deep freeze. The accusations are flying, the diplomats are on the move, and the future of the relationship between these two countries remains uncertain. What happens next is anyone's guess. Will cooler heads prevail, leading to a thawing of relations and a return to a more cooperative dynamic? Or will this diplomatic standoff continue to fester, further damaging the ties that bind these two nations? One thing is for sure, The world is watching. The outcome of this diplomatic row has implications that extend far beyond the borders of India and Canada. It's a reminder that in our interconnected world, even seemingly distant conflicts can have ripple effects that are felt globally.